Hello everyone and welcome to a new video from Your Overwatch. I'm Eddie the Chump and today we're going to talk about Ashe. I've spent the last few days watching how Dallas Fuel's Effect has been playing her in an effort to bring you a guide on how to optimize her. I highly recommend you watch him too for further learning. His stream link will be in the description box below. Now first things first, all the footage is obviously from the PTR, which brings with it a few caveats. Firstly, Effect won't have been playing against the best opponents in every match, which means he could play much more greedily than he might have been able to get away with against better players and more organized teams. And secondly, her kit is obviously so new that it might be subject to adjustments from Blizzard before she goes live. But a lot of the principles of how to play her will remain largely the same. Her nature as a highly mechanically demanding hero will always be a factor, for example. So with that said, we're going to break her kit down and look at the ways a pro player of Effect's skill level was able to leverage it. As a short introduction, I'd like to outline Ashe in the following terms. All of her kit items are extremely multi-purpose, and it's less about use coach gun to do X and TNT to do Y in a strict sense. It's more a case of her kit allows her to do so many different things, it's down to the player's decision making and mechanical ability that defines how much value she can get. Because of that, I'll start each section with simpler examples of each kit item's use and move on to more advanced and difficult ones that combine all of them together, because that's where being really good with Ashe lies, in being fluid with her kit and combining her abilities together cyclically to become one of the most effective playmaking damage heroes in the entire game. FPS Basics. So the first section, we're going to explore how a player like Effect exploits his really solid FPS fundamentals as far as aiming is concerned. Ashe is a weapon-focused hero, so getting the most out of the Viper is a big part of her production. A quick note, almost always, Effect was aiming down sight, with hipfire only being used to confirm a kill after a headshot or to spam at very close range. This might be exploited against better opponents, time will tell, but for now at least, ADS is where Effect got most of his value. Now, this first clip from Oasis shows how Effect uses proper reticle placement to make difficult shots much easier. After deleting the Roadhog, Effect trains his aim at head height on the two doors to the side of the point. What this allows him to do is make small adjustments whenever a target moves into his view much easier. He's not having to make wild flicks in order to hit the Ashe and the Ana, as his reticle is already in largely the right place. Even if he doesn't hit the headshots, he stands a good chance of reliably getting good damage onto them, which he does. If you know where someone is but can't see them, train your aim on where they will likely move to ahead of time. It'll make a lot more of your shots a higher percentage. Another aspect of this is pre-aiming a target before you get into a duel with them. This next clip, although very short, shows how Effect does this. He glimpses the enemy Ashe through a doorway and fluidly jump strafes and pre-aims where she will likely be before the duel actually occurs. This means he's prepared to shoot quicker and more accurately than his opponent. When he lands, he has to flick adjust, sure, but because he pre-aimed in preparation, this is much easier than it would have been had he not done so. A lot of the outcome of a duel has to do with how well prepared you are for it, especially if the windows of opportunity are small and the skill levels between the players are close to equal. Thirdly, a huge amount of having good aim comes down to learning and reading enemy animations correctly. This clip on King's Row 3rd shows these skills off. Firstly, he takes an angle on the Widow. Now despite his first miss, he is reading between each shot how the Widow is moving, and as she hasn't, the follow-up shot is much easier. Then he moves to hit the Ashe and again misses narrowly, but watch how he's patient to see how she moves and hits the shot as she falls from cover in a way that's predictable. He doesn't rush his shot. Then the Moira becomes his next target, and he's always pacing his shots to be able to adjust based on how she's trying to evade. The first shot is the easiest as she's standing fairly still, then she moves left and he makes the adjustment, and then left again and he kills her. Out of 7 shots fired, Effect hits 5 and gets 3 kills, largely through animation reading and not crazy mechanical flicks. Of course he can hit those, but that's really the icing on the cake. A lot of the reason he can be so productive with Ashe is because he makes a lot of shots easier for himself and is therefore consistent. You can learn that too, it just takes practice. Effect is known for his work ethic, spending many hours in Aim Hero and Osu to sharpen up his skills. Sure, he has talent, but it's optimized through hard work. Coach gun. Right, now let's move on to Ashe's actual kit. The The coach gun is massively important to Ashe, and there's a few reasons for that. Effect is capable of using it in many different applications. The first, and most obvious to a lot of players, is as a mobility tool, both in terms of aggression, in taking up angles that one can then leverage your own damage from, like a rocket boost from Pharah or a grapple from Widow. This allows you to take up space in places enemies might not be prepared to defend against, and use other parts of her kit, like TNT, to utterly disrupt an enemy formation. The speed at which she can do this is also a factor. Coach gun allows Ashe to dictate the pace and setting of engagements all in very short order. This is naturally, if done correctly, incredibly hard to defend against. 1 second she's in a zone you can manage with shielding and your own positioning, and the next she's hitting headshots and launching TNT from somewhere you can't counteract swiftly. That alone is a big weapon. But the coach gun can also be used as a defensive escape. Dive tanks like Winston, mobility DPS like Doomfist, or anything really that tries to come and get Ashe can struggle because she basically has a get out of jail free card. So not only can you play greedily with your own positioning, but you have the means to evade focus in a way that very few other characters can. In comparison to other snipers in particular, Ashe is considerably less punishable in this way, provided you, like Effect does, manages the cooldown correctly. Widow, when dove, can outfootsie a dive tank to run away. Ashe doesn't need to do that. She can just deny them that initial pressure by pushing them away. However, you do have to be a little bit careful with this cooldown. 10 seconds is quite a long time, and holding on to this ability to not waste it unnecessarily is a trait Effect demonstrates well. You want to use it like he does, either to create opportunity or frustrate enemies coming to punish. In other words, use it sparingly and at the most opportune times. It'll get the most value that way. But it's not all about Ashe's mobility herself. Effect shows that it's incredibly useful in controlling the mobility of others. Dive tanks can get stuffed when trying to pressure you, as I said, and ultimates like Genji Blade can be crowd controlled in a very practical way. The most dangerous part of a Blade is when he first comes at you and is amongst your formation getting quick cleave kills. Effect in this clip just denies him the ability to get close enough to him. Sure, his Ana dies, and ideally it would be done in a way that costs nobody their life, but Effect quickly kills this high value ult and continues to just devastate the enemy team, all through the use of one cooldown. It not only knocks the target back, but also the Ashe player themselves, which is important as the gap between you and the thing you want to keep away is even further than, say, a Lucio boop. It also has use in duels, as it can crowd control an enemy in air to make them easier to hit, like a Lucio can. In this scenario, you have the control. You get to dictate where the duel happens and on what terms. That's incredibly powerful. Like any displacement ability, environmental kills are also an option to you, although I would caution against using it that way unless a golden opportunity presents itself. The reason being, it's just too valuable a cooldown to use that way and not secure a kill. You might have serious need of it in another application later on. In totality then, it's way more flexible than just using it to flank over walls or to high ground. Although those uses are of course good, it's capable of much more. My personal favourite clip of Effect's coach gun use is this one from Hollywood, where he uses the coach gun as an escape from an ulting Winston and takes high ground, which he then goes on to make full use of by killing all the things. This is how fluid and dexterous it can be, and therefore the power of the ability is in how you choose to use it. TNT. Now Ashe's explosive cooldown is kind of the opposite. Effect uses it as often as possible because there's almost no bad use for it. A high percentage of the time, he'll start off an engagement with it whenever an opportunity arises, whether it be against a low number of targets or many, and the reason for that is the damage is so good and can affect so many enemies at one time, it represents a huge head start in any fight and lessens the performance pressure of follow-up shots because you'll actually need to hit less to get things done. Depending on the flow of a match, Effect is also great at using it to clean up kills once a target moves out of his line of sight, and that's the key. The TNT can reach enemies that you yourself cannot see because it's an AoE, so detonating it over walls or round cover can be devastatingly effective. The distance you can throw it is actually really far, should you need to hit something miles away, and you also largely have the choice about when to activate it, as you can shoot it at a key time or just let it sit there. One interesting way Effect uses it is as space denial. He'll use it to check corners and corridors, he'll use it to push enemy teams back from a comfortable position into an unfavourable one. You can't just stand and burn, you have to react to it. Usually that means not remaining where you were, which opens up gaps not only for Ashe, but for her teammates too. Unlike many of the snipers, Ashe isn't as bothered by shielding, and that's partially to do with her mobility, but also because TNT allows her to get damage behind those shields in a number of ways. You can throw it over a shield and detonate it once it's past it in the air. You can throw it on the floor into space that you know an enemy tank might want to move through and let it detonate by itself, or because of the positioning you can take up with Coach Gun, you can be at an off angle and throw it from a direction they can't shield while also fighting the rest of your team from a different position. This gives her a much better matchup against Brig in particular compared with some other DPS. Brig's shield may seem strong in many ways, but lobbing TNT above or around it is fairly straightforward, which is not something that Hanzo or Widow can boast. It's really strong, so use it almost whenever you can. Now there is another aspect that I saw Effect using it for that I haven't really seen from other top players. As mentioned in the previous section, Coach Gun allows Ashe to punish those coming to get her. Well, TNT can be used in this way too. In this clip on Oasis, Effect uses it preemptively on a McCree he knows will want to chase him down. The McCree walks right into it and is easily dispatched. That's footsie, son. Get wrecked. Likewise, it's not just about whether it does in fact catch people out like that, it's also about creating threat. If an enemy sees you drop TNT as they attack you, especially when trying to close the distance, they know their time is limited before being in danger themselves. This is actually related to another way that I saw Effect use it that was, to be frank, a little bit rude. Whenever an enemy is incapacitated, like say slept by an Ana, dropping TNT next to them is just kinda mean. It also works when an enemy incapacitates themselves, like say Mei does when she uses Ice Block. Throwing it next to her like Effect does here means Mei can have a very rude awakening. Sure, she can choose to come out of it early, but then you could just shoot it early anyway before the fuse runs out. The power is in your hands. It's a tool that allows you to dictate a fight on your terms in so many ways its strength cannot be overestimated, and when you start combining Ashe's two abilities together, that's when things can get a little bit silly. They allow you so much control of so many aspects of a fight, the value a player can get from them is almost limitless. If you have the mechanics to back all this playmaking up, you can be scary in a way Overwatch doesn't see often. Bob. So I'll be totally honest, Ashe's ult is one area of her kit that probably will benefit from development over time. In basic terms, firstly, it isn't a suicide button, which is great, and there are ways I saw Effect getting value with it. The first is to use Bob to create another angle of attack, in a similar way that a Torb turret can. Occupy your enemy's attention and then shoot them from another angle that they're not prepared for. Yes, Bob does do significant damage, but it's quite easy to line of sight or shield against. You, however, while that's happening, are another story entirely. Now I did see a few examples of Effect using Bob's charge and launch capacity to remove a tank from a bunker setup, and that's the area I think the pros will take this ult in the future. Knocking targets into the air as a group will definitely be useful, but on the PTR, Effect wasn't always playing against proper comps, where that was either practical or he had the opportunity to do so. The fact that Bob can stall objectives will surely be applicable somewhere, and that leads into a key aspect of using Bob effectively. Bob will run off a cliff if you point him in a direction where there is no geometry or enemies in the way, to quite comic effect. So stuffing him against walls or say a cart from short range is a way to guarantee he at least gets some value. In fact, Effect started stuffing Bob against walls that he was next to use him as some kind of super turret to protect himself with. By standing next to Bob in this way, anything that tried to fight him would be fighting Bob too, which let me just say doesn't often end well for them. That might not be Bob's most optimized use overall, but at least in solo queue, using him to create that extra angle and doing damage yourself, or using him to protect you like a sentry, are ways to get value in the short term. The fact Bob can be nanoed and healed will surely be explored in greater detail at the pro level and once Ashe goes live to the main game, and that's partly why I'm so excited for these PTR weeks to go by quickly. So by the end of this video, I hope you have a better idea of how to get the most out of Ashe. She's an S tier hero in the right hands, particularly if you're on the upper end of the mechanical skill distribution. If you are one of those players, then I for one cannot wait to see some of the hugely flashy plays on Reddit and social media that are sure to become a mainstay. Once again, at the end, I'd just like to promote Effect's stream a little bit. His stream link will be in the description box below. I really do recommend you go and watch him. He's an excellent player to learn from, and I really hope you enjoyed the video. If you did, please don't forget to leave a rating. If you never want to miss another video of ours again, please click the bell icon next to the subscribe button on our channel to join the notification squad. You'll be in great company. And finally, please follow the Your Overwatch Twitter. It's where you can find updates about new videos and other cool stuff. I've been Eddie the Chump, and until next time.